Regina Apostolorum,
ora pro
ora
nobis.
nobis, nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. Amen. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this optional course of the Master in Bioethics of the program of the Master in Bioethics, and it's an optional course during this intensive week. An intensive week that you have been suffering from this morning with a lot of classes, but that I hope you will enjoy during this week through the different courses that the program offers to the students. This specific course is called Global Bioethics and the UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights. Global Bioethics and the UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights. So first of all, and since we are in a small group, I would like you to tell us, what do you think global bioethic means? And why you have chosen this course? What would you like to get during these classes? Today we will have 2 sessions, and tomorrow we will have 5 sessions. Quite short or brief course, short course, but quite intense. So Felix, what do you mean? What have you ever heard about global bioethics, and what is for you global bioethics?
I would assume from the term global that it is bioethics as it is practiced across the divides of the world. Judging from the UNESCO declaration and the intent to make bioethics a global discipline. So I would assume that this course goes in line with the UNESCO mindset of bringing bioethics, especially to developing countries. And then a maintenance of the tenets of bioethics across scientific and medical interventions.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. You have mentioned a couple of things. One is that global bioethics might be understood as a kind of comparison between the different currents of bioethics in the world, but as you will see, this is not the main concept of global bioethics. It's more the second part of your ideas. Lawrence, what do you think? For you, what is the meaning of global bioethics? Lawrence, could you activate your audio, please?
Sorry. In global bioethics, I see the universality of bioethics, not to a particular place, but that involves every humanity or every strata. It is something that is not static, but is something that rolls over. That is the way I see it. And I hook it up to the sanctity of human life and life in particular. That is the way I look at it.
Thank you, Lauren. So the concept of universality, it's crucial, as we will see. But what is the difference between global bioethics and personalist bioethics? Because as far as I know, also personalist bioethics intends to be universal. It's not only for Italians, for the friends of Cardinal Sgreccia. It's also universal. So the concept of universalism or universality is present, but we will see that it's not exactly the same that from other bioethical traditions. And we will compare also what some of the differences between the global bioethics approach and the personalist approach and from other ethical or bioethical systems. Leonard,
Okay.
what is for you global bioethics?
Yeah, thinking of this global bioethics, what comes to my mind is a bioethics. How can different ideologies in bioethics, how can different perspectives, different cultures in bioethics come together to have a common agreement on certain issues, global issues? And again, holding the fact that it is linked to UNESCO Declaration on Human Rights. And UNESCO is a kind of international organism or organization that unites different cultures. So it is a bioethics that tries to bring different, listen to different orientations, different ideas, and try to come together on how to follow sensitive issues regarding this, regarding the bioethical issues on the globe today, without saying this one is better, this one is not better, without making any judgment on any orientation, but look for a point of agreement. So that's.
Thank you, Leonard. This is right. And since the source of global bioethics is the international community, we will see that it's a different way of delivering or deliberating and making bioethics. It's the result of negotiations among the different governments, among the different states. So look that some of the things you have already mentioned, both Felix and Lawrence are okay. So it's the concept of universality, how we combine universality with also local, the diversity of the different countries, the different religions, the different states, and then how these principles of global bioethics, of these rules, of these values are decided in the international community. So, Anthony, what do you think about global bioethics? What is global bioethics for you, according to what you have heard or read?
Okay, so far, I would say that global bioethics, coming from the point of view that the problem of man is a universal problem. It's not only those who are in the Catholic Church or those who read the Bible that are concerned with these problems of man, but it's a universal problem. So in global bioethics, I would say that it tries to look for a global set of principles, a kind of interdisciplinary studies in order to see how different cultures, because obviously we know there is a cultural diversity and religion and how people approach matters, but with UNESCO and a global view of principles, in order to bring all these things together to see if we can reach a kind of agreement based on the values of man. Thank you.
Okay, Anthony, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that the last one is Carla Maria. would you like to share with us, what do you think global bioethics is?
Salve professore, senta, io non sapevo che il corso fosse in inglese, mi scuso molto, ho un po' di difficoltà a seguirlo, nel senso che capisco ma non tutto, quindi...
In questo caso tu puoi parlare in italiano, non c'è problema, e se vuoi seguire il corso di inglese lo puoi seguire, perché il corso era programmato in inglese, sì.
Non ho fatto caso quando ho fatto la richiesta dei corsi opzionali.
Comunque ancora credo...
Comunque io ci provo, ecco.
Sì, prova, e se no comunque c'è in alternativa, c'è il corso del professor Renzo Di Natale su antropologia integrale, credo, in parallelo al mio. Quindi, va bene. Comunque oggi sei cordialmente benvenuta.
Grazie.
Pur per il sbaglio.
Posso dare un parere riguardo alla...
Certo.
Cos'è per me la bioetica globale?
La bioetica globale, di quello che hai sentito, che hai letto, se hai letto su questa cosa?
Allora, io devo dire la verità, cioè per me è nuovo sentire proprio il termine bioetica globale. Rispetto agli altri forse parto un po' svantaggiata da questo punto di vista. Però penso che riguardi, no? Sentendo, cercando di capire anche quello che hanno detto gli altri, sono d'accordo sul fatto che comunque è un confronto tra le varie visioni bioetiche che riguardano comunque dei problemi globali, problemi che riguardano un po' tutto il mondo. Quindi un po' tutti i paesi, quindi una discussione su argomenti di bioetica che toccano un po' tutti,
E
la
quello
popolazione generale del mondo mondiale.
E quello sicuramente c'è, ma vedremo che, come ho detto anche prima, uno dice no, ma anche la bioetica des Grecia sta affrontando dei problemi che non sono dell'Italia, che non sono solo dei cattolici, ma che ha una prospettiva anche universale, perché la bioetica è universale. Quindi a me soprattutto interessava molto sapere il punto di partenza, no, dei partecipanti a questo corso. Manca, credo, Modise di darci il suo, to give us your insights about what is global bioethics. My idea is to know the point of departure of this course so that we can then move in the course trying to develop in a more articulated way what is the global bioethics and why in a Catholic university, in a pontifical university, we propose a course in global bioethics. Modis?
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for the opportunity. My understanding as far as global bioethics is concerned would be a bioethics which is like very broad, in a sense that we tackle issues generally related to ethics and bioethics in general, which is not a bioethics that is confined to a particular corner, but is a bioethics which covers everything bioethical in a general perspective. That would be my understanding of what we call global bioethics. It's not a bioethics that is only confined to a particular matter, but it's bioethics in broad. Like we can speak of things from an environmental point of view, your medical point of view, your ethics in general, like for instance political ethics, things like that. I think that's what I have in mind, as when we talk about a global bioethics. That's my take.
Thank you, Modis. So during this course, we are going to analyze some of the main features of global bioethics, and it's important, or it is interesting, to keep in mind which other currents of bioethics exist so that we can analyze the specificity of global bioethics in respect to other bioethical systems or bioethical traditions. So please go to the chat right now and then write there which other bioethical traditions, in addition to global bioethics, you know or you have heard during the license or the master in bioethics. Other systems, ethical systems that you have heard about them, because this is going to help us to keep in mind which are some of the differences and the specificity of what we call global bioethics. So for example, I'm going to write the first. We have mentioned personalist bioethics. Could you write in the chat other systems you have heard or read talking about bioethics? Secular bioethics more than laical bioethics. I think you wanted, Leonard, you wanted to write secular.
Secular bioethics, yes.
It's more secular, that means non-religious or civil bioethics. Other traditions you have a study. Utilitarianism. That in bioethics focused basically in the the evaluation of the utility, the harms, risks, and benefits, then the existentialism bioethics. Probably you have heard also have you heard about principialism? Do you remember some of the main authors? It's a tradition very broad, very spread in the world, from Bechamp's Childress, the four principles of autonomy, justice, beneficence, and non-maleficence. Have you heard about this? For sure.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we have here some of the systems, and we are going to move and to focus in global bioethics, keeping in mind the ideas you have shared at the beginning of this conversation, and also the existence of these other ethical or bioethical systems around the world. I'm going to share my screen and to show you some of the main learning outcomes of this short course. In terms of knowledge we want to get, that means basically to remember some of the main concepts of international human rights law, because as you will see, and we have already mentioned, global bioethics moves in the context of international organizations. we will try to understand and to know better the meaning, the importance of global bioethics for Catholics that are trying to be trained in bioethics to interact with the world. It's to be in contact with the society at national and international level. And then we are going to focus in the main tool that we have in the international human rights law on global bioethics. In other words, the UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. And this is something that we can also reflect briefly, because we are talking about an international tool. That means a declaration. It's not an agreement, it's not a treaty, but it's an universal declaration that has been approved within UNESCO. That is one of the agencies of the United Nations. So it has been approved at global level. And on the other hand, it's a very specific tool because deals with human rights or bioethics and human rights. This is not the Universal Declaration on Human Rights approved by the United Nations in 1948. This Universal Declaration, it's a kind of Zoom where the international community focused on the topics related to life sciences and medicine and tries to apply the general human rights principles set up in 1948, and in 2005 are applied specifically to bioethical issues. Then, after this course, we expect you to know, to learn how to apply universal principles of this Universal Declaration of the UNESCO to a specific bioethical dilemmas. So the main thing, and from right now, we have to understand that this international instrument contains basically general principles, 15 general principles. And that means that by its own nature, it doesn't get into the details about what to do and what to not to do. It moves at the level of principles. On the other hand, we expect you will learn how to use these universal principles when you move in the national or local arena, because as we will see, these principles are applicable to your local situations. It offers these 15 principles, allows you a broader and a more thorough vision of topics related to bioethics. And since bioethical issues are going to be analyzed or presented in the light of human rights, that means that we can learn how to evaluate and how to use the human rights theory in evaluating and discerning about bioethical issues. As we will see, probably global bioethics offers a set of principles that are more complete, more integral vision in comparison, for example, to utilitarianism we have already mentioned, or principialism. And finally, we will try to evaluate and analyze to what extent global bioethics is compatible in comparison with personalist bioethics and the social teaching of the church. And this, of course, is important because we are in a pontifical university and we want to offer you tools that can be useful for the future, your professional exercise of bioethics. And it's not to present something that is, as we will see, something that is against the social teaching of the church, against the personalist bioethics. But on the other hand, it's important to know that we are moving in different layers. And in some cases, global bioethics or personalist bioethics can be in opposition to other visions in the application of these specific principles. Okay, having seen this, you will find I would say, some bibliography that can be interesting for you. And in the Moodle, in the materials online, you will find a copy of this book that is the Universal Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights, edited by Professor Henk ten Haaf, that has been for a long period of time the chief of the International Bioethics Committee of UNESCO that participated during the elaboration, negotiation, and approval of the UNESCO declaration. Look that, and you will find in this link also some materials that UNESCO have produced, didactic materials that has produced to know better about this important declaration. And then you have other books you can find. Wait a minute, Nick. You have other books, for example, this book also from Henk ten Haaf. It's a book called Global Bioethics and Introduction, published by Routledge. There is a handbook of global bioethics. There is an encyclopedia of global bioethics. So as you can right now see, there is a lot of writings and literature specifically on global bioethics. And we are going to, I would say, during these classes of today and tomorrow, a general overview of what global bioethics is, and specifically to study the UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights. In the Moodle material, you will find, you will find what, timing. You will find some cases of study, Don't worry about this. The cases of study are part of the homework you will have to do in this course, in which basically we will choose some of the cases proposed. As you can see, are 5 cases, different topics, and how using the UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights, which are the principles that you will apply for this case or for this case. You have to work only in one single case. I'm not going to get right now into the details of the assignment for this course to move forward. So basically, the point of departure of this course in global bioethics is the reality of human rights that are at stake in topics related to bioethics. I think that some of you have followed already my course in international law or in introduction to law about natural law, natural rights. And the point of departure is that in this course, we are going to take a perspective that is basically ethical and legal. Ethical and legal. This is not moral theology. This course is not moral theology. It's not bioethics. It's this kind of bioethics, yes, but in the light of human rights. Why? Because when we are dealing in topics related to life sciences and medicine, environmental ethics, there are human rights that are at stake. It's the right to life for sure, but not only the right to life. It's our freedom, it's our integrity, it's our right to family, it's the freedom of conscience, the freedom of research. So we are going to approach the analysis of human behavior in the light of human rights, and look that from the definition of personalist bioethics of Grecia, there's not a big difference. Because when we talk about personalist bioethics, we define bioethics as the discipline that studies the human behavior in the field of the life sciences and medicine in the light of rational moral principles. Rational moral principles in the light. In our case, we are going to analyze in the light of human rights. But human rights, we know, are ethical demands. Are ethical demands that should be declared and recognized and promoted and guaranteed by the civil law at national and international level. So we are not talking about different worlds. There is a relation because in both cases, we are going to analyze the human behavior with similar tools. When we talked in the introduction to law course about what is the civil law, we mentioned that the civil law is a statement promulgated by the legitimate authority according to recta ratio, and for the common good, And when we humans declare human rights, we should use recta ratio to declare this important, to recognize these fundamental needs that we call human rights or fundamental fundamental rights. But then, talking about global bioethics, we will go to some details about different characteristics of features of global bioethics, specifically analyzing and studying this UNESCO Declaration in Bioethics and Human Rights. The UNESCO Declaration in Human Rights is not a very long and big international text. Look at this. Really small. But it's very important. We will study this document, this declaration of the international community about how we should behave when dealing with topics, issues related to life sciences, medicine, and the environment. And then we will analyze some of the principles for the interpretation of this Universal Declaration, as well as the 15 principles. In the principialism, we have studied the 4 principles: autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. These 4 principles are, of course, to some extent included in the 15. But we will see also that the global bioethics have a broader horizon, and that it's probably much more sensitive to cultural diversity, that is also more sensitive and closer to the social teaching of the church than the 4 principles of Bechamps and Childress. Look that in most of the universities of the world, when they teach bioethics, they use the 4 principles of principialism. But we will see that this is a vision that is incomplete. At least it was necessary to make more explicit some of the principles that in the principialism were born in the Western tradition, that was born more in a medical environment or biomedical environment. And we know that bioethics is not only biomedical research ethics or clinical ethics. And we will see in detail the contribution that the UNESCO Declaration is offering to the world and to the international community in the approach to bioethical issues. Then we will move in some detail, reflecting about a couple of articles or principles of the UNESCO Declaration, like the protection of vulnerable populations. What does it mean, this protection of vulnerable population? Look, that this is not present in the 4 principles of Bechamps as such. It could be understood implicit in beneficence or in non-maleficence, in justice, but the UNESCO Declaration wrote and declared and specific principles to protect vulnerable populations, and we will see who they are. Poor people, illiterate people, pregnant women, people having not the capacity to offer their consent, minor, people with mental disorders, people in prison. So there is different people that have this condition of vulnerability, and we will analyze how the UNESCO declarations call the attention to have a specific care for these people. And another principle that is the respect of cultural diversity and pluralism, it's one of the 15 principles, and we will move also in detail to this specific principle that is not present in the 4 principles of principialism. Okay. So now we have, let me see. We are going to have a 10 minutes coffee break, but let me, we will set about bioethics and human rights. So before doing a coffee break, do you have any doubts, any questions about what we have just presented, or some suggestions?
No. For me, as you are explaining the 15 principles, I was impressed because I tried to check some documents, the Bioethics Commission in Nigeria, to see the principles guiding what they do. I see that there is mostly clinical ethics in clinical research, and their principles are usually the principles of principialism or principialism. So just
Principialism.
yes, that's the way. It's a little bit different from the personalistic bioethics that we are studying here at Regina Apostolorum. So I have been looking forward to see a point of reconciliation, how it is possible to put this together. But this course, I think, is really good for me, because I now see how a point where UNESCO will come in to harmonize this point. After using one of personalism that we are doing in Regina Apostolorum, and the American, because the one in Nigeria, the bioethics in Nigeria, is founded and trained by the American bioethics, which is mainly of these principles, and that is what they are using. That is their.
We will see that at the origin of the negotiation of the UNESCO declaration, it was a very important contribution from countries from Africa, and especially from Latin America, that incorporated in the principles more social or communitarian principles in comparison with the 4 principles of the principialism. Okay.
Professor, excuse me. Yeah, I was happy when you explained more on talking about the protection of the vulnerable population. Yeah, because that is an aspect that people seem not to really concentrate on. Especially even talking about beginning from the minor and then the elderly, and those who who lack the mental capacity.
Yep.
So I was trying to reconcile that so far, but then I was so happy when you talked on it. We talked on it because when we are talking about bioethics, without that, I think we have not really done well. But this is an aspect we talks about life, but life that should be touched.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. It is true, and some people from in some cases, people from principialism will claim that the protection of elderly and vulnerable people, it's within the beneficence. Beneficence doesn't mean that you have to be equally, exactly beneficence with all the people in a similar way. No, you have to adapt depending on the condition of the people. So for vulnerable people, if you are beneficent with your behavior, means that you are taking into consideration this vulnerability. And they are right, they are right. But I think it's important also recognize the contribution to of the global bioethics in making more explicit. It's important to make more explicit because it helps in the process of discernment. When you have to take decisions at personal level or communitarian level or political level, if you have the 15 principles, you can like a check to see if there is something that you are missing that will be important to take into consideration. And then that's why we think that also from a Catholic perspective, these principles are completely valid and in harmony with the personalist bioethics, of course. But on the other hand, to know and study global bioethics will allow you and me to facilitate the dialogue when you move in the international community, where you cannot use or justify some of the aspects by an ontological or metaphysical reasoning, which is hard for many people to understand without a strong philosophical background, but you can use the categories of the human rights law, language, and concepts for the same purpose. So it's a tool that can help you to develop your bioethical discourse adapted to a more global and diverse environment.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to make a coffee break and we will restart at 6.
Okay.
6. I don't remember if in the Moodle material I uploaded the Universal Declaration. But if you have time during the coffee break or for tomorrow, please download the text of the UNESCO Declaration, because this is something that we are going to use very much, and it's good to have at hand for the dynamic and the conversations we will have today and tomorrow. Okay? See you at 6, from 6 to 6:30, the second part of this session. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.